Okay. Hello, YouTube. Hey, YouTube, what's up? We're waiting for one of our guests, but we're kind of late from when, I guess, Elizabeth, you promised everybody 8 o'clock, right?
Oh, so it's not my fault, huh?
No. We're waiting. We're waiting for Chris.
Evening. We had a great 4 o'clock. So,
All right.
We're waiting for Chris Teleska, and you're here, and Dan is here. We've been having a great conversation, and I realized that would be one of the better shows I'd ever done if I had it turned on.
Oh.
So Dan was worried about being nervous on the microphone, and he's been on the microphone having a great conversation now about journalism. Now the YouTube button is pushed. Now you'll be nervous.
I'm going to just freeze up again. It's a shame.
Yeah. So you went to J school at Carolina?
Yes.
Okay. And I was explaining. We'll replay the conversation and shorten it up a little bit. I was explaining that you have a journalism degree.
Mm-hmm.
I have a journalism semester. The most important college course I ever took because it taught me how to write.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way about my time there. All the classes I learned, it was learning a lot of fundamental things, not what to think, but how to think, really how to interpret a lot of data and communicate it, how to tell a story with a set of facts, which I think is very key. People resonate with narratives. They don't resonate with a data sheet. And that's really where the skill of journalism comes in.
Yeah. And you're living through a transition. You're on probably the downside of the hump of the transition. And I, of course, grew up on the upside before there was any hump to think about, which is journalism was pure lack of opinion. It was all just the facts. Just tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are in, as I put it a moment ago, we know more about what people think than what the facts are because everybody's thinking something different. So where do you want to see journalism? How do you?
I guess as I was talking earlier in our conversation there, I want people to announce their biases when they get on and they report a story, because it gives a lot of the criticism out there online a lot of weight when they don't try to explain that. It shows up in the words you choose or the things you choose not to cover and illustrate in your story. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of those people are right online when they criticize people for having bias. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has their own personal politics and their reasons to believe what they believe. The profession of journalism is about, I guess, stepping past that and being able to describe things in a way that is receptive to a lot of people, but that bias still comes through.
The stories I read in the News and Observer.
Yeah.
Do you see bias in the front page? Obviously, once you get to the editorial pages, you do.
Sure. I think it's harder to interpret what that bias is. And some people who come into a story with skepticism about somebody who's, writing the story, who's writing the article. Like if you don't like the News and Observer, if you don't like the New York Times because they have liberal bias, you're going to come in with this mindset of skepticism, and you're going to, in a way, confirmation your bias to seeing all of the problems. Whereas if you inherently agree with a lot of the same things that the writers of the New York Times do, then you might skip past it. You might not see it. Or you'll take an opinionated word or a word choice and kind of view it as fact. You don't think about it. And
that may be why I never looked at standard journalism as being particularly left-wing, because I am left-wing. And so I'm the fish not being aware of the water I'm swimming in. You can join in any time, Elizabeth.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm enjoying this.
Sure.
Go ahead. Interesting observations, Yeah, because that's what you say. I'm like, if it's a left-wing situation, like everything is normal, it's hard to start now seeing when people say that a little extreme. I'm like, no, they just said what they meant, Well,
if I'm watching MSNBC, I can tell I'm getting left-wing news. Sure. If I'm watching Fox, I can tell I'm getting beat over the head with right-wing news. If I'm watching CNN, I feel left-wing-ish. If I read the News and Observer, I feel neutral until I get to the editorial page. If I listen to the News and Observer's podcast, their Under the Dome podcast, the reporters' biases show up more because they're talking and they're not filtering themselves so much.
Do you feel like when you hear the editorial folks in News and Observers, what did you call that podcast? I'm sorry, what was the name of that?
I think it's Under the Dome.
Under the Dome? Okay.
I think that's what it is.
So when you hear them delivering the news that they deliver on Under the Dome, do you challenge the validity of the facts that they give? Not so much their interpretation of what it means, but just the facts of it? Do you think anybody would listen to that and think that what they're saying is absolute fabrication? Like I just saw an elephant fly in the sky 17 minutes ago, right?
Yeah, because it's it's called the Domecast.
Okay, the Domecast.
Yeah, and because you can hear their biases. Yeah, I think some people will question the facts, even though it's the same facts that they printed in the paper.
See, that's frustrating because, of course, people are going to come to the table with opinions, but if we operate under a different set of what's real, and if people don't understand how to critically analyze something and learn to check sources for things, then it's like people are living in two separate realities. And that's why it's so hard to have any kind of conversation with people if, one person thinks that the sky is blue and the other person thinks that it's red. That's there. One of those two answers is true. Whether or not you don't like the color of blue, maybe you want the sky to be red, doesn't mean that the sky is red. And and that's very frustrating nowadays. There are so many communities online where people will find their little sites and they silo themselves into these groups of thought, and they don't allow themselves to have those viewpoints challenged. And I see it all the time on even just like, are you familiar with Reddit? Do you go on Reddit much?
I'm a Redditor. Yeah.
Okay. So, all the different subreddits, you look at the mindset of a place like the Donald or say Chapo Trap House, our Chapo Trap House, or
that one I've never heard of.
Okay.
I've been on the Donald.
Okay.
In Little Tiptoe.
So it's a site.
Careful.
But one thing that people on the Donald, and for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's a subreddit that was, I feel like, originally started as like a troll subreddit. They had to be kidding, and then over time, people have just gravitated toward it.
Started taking them.
Yeah, they started taking it seriously, and they over there they love Donald Trump, and they will do backflips to justify a lot of what he does, and they don't allow for people to challenge those kinds of viewpoints on things, right? Their moderators will delete any content that doesn't agree, and their posters, their regular users, will downvote any content that they don't like.
Here, let me prove something.
Sure.
That's very astute, Pede.
What?
That's very astute, Pede.
Pede.
Oh, God, you don't get the Pede part?
Oh, I know what Pede is. Centipede.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
You know why they call it? Where the Pede thing comes from?
I do know where the Pede things come from.
I had to look that up.
Where did it come from? Where did it come from?
So there was, oh my God, and I know the context for this because I love the band that did this. So there was a dubstep based song from like early 2010 by a group called Knife Party, and it starts with this clip of like a nature documentary, okay, and the
Chris is trying to get online.
Okay.
Here.
Hello.
Yep,
Hey.
I'm going to have to hang up here and call you back because Skype doesn't let me merge calls.
Can you make it an audio call because I'm actually driving to pick up a client whose
you can
car
be
has
on
broken
audio
down by the side of the road.
Yeah, you can be on
Marvelous. Thank you
audio.
very much.
Your phone should ring in seconds. Stand by.
All right.
I'll pause my story until we get all that figured out, or explanation, I suppose. Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry, we had technical stuff to do.
There you are.
We're gonna have Chris in a moment. He'll be on audio. I hope it works this way.
I'm laughing so much because I'm just thinking about the YouTube clips where they they play like little scripts of Donald like owning people during the debates, and they have like the dubstep remixes behind him. I don't know if you've seen any of those. You Can't Stump the Trump. So funny. Horrifying.
I need someone to point me to those. Chris, are you on here? Hello, Chris. Can you hear us? We're not hearing you.
Oh.
I see your little icon. We've been having a great conversation before we get started.
Never in my life did I think I would talk about Knife Party on the air and explain a meme like that. But
did we explain what a centipede is?
I guess I was about to.
You were working.
Yeah, working there.
Working your way circuitously.
There's a lot of context for that one for it to make sense. If you don't mind me just continuing here, are we still on air?
Yeah, we're still on YouTube Live. We're still in the warm-up for the show.
Gotcha.
We're not doing the show yet. I'm still trying to get Chris on the call.
Fair enough. So in that song, right before before the bass drops and the song gets into the crazy like wob 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 of the dubstep, there's this little nature documentary thing where it talks about the centipede has these two long hollow fangs in which it injects venom into its prey. It is a nimble navigator, and then like I don't remember the exact phrase, but it says something where it quickly strikes and paralyzes its foe, and then it breaks down into this ridiculous like wubbing,
and then anybody who's 50% bigger than it is steps on it and makes a little green slime on the stuff.
So they called Donald Trump a centipede because he was such a nimble navigator, they said and that phrase still sticks. They call themselves nimble navigator if you're a Trump supporter. Yeah. In fact, on like the Ask Trump Supporters subreddit, if you are a Trump supporter, you are given the flair tag of nimble navigator. So the meme has just become this pervasive thing that is now like an official scholarly level discussion. You're a nimble navigator, but that's a centipede, and I'm gonna have to link you the video when we're done here, because it is ridiculous. Scary now that he's actually become president, but back then it was funny because nobody thought he was going to win. So,
okay, so I'm not getting Chris here. I'll try one more time.
So you got the Donald, and they have their siloed opinions about things.
Yeah.
And they regularly criticize our politics, which is considered like the neutral basic politics subreddit. And they're not wrong in the sense that most of Reddit's users are probably around my age. I think if you look at the statistics, around my age and generally left-leaning. So, of course, the general hive mind of a subreddit that is one of the like 50 defaults you get when you have a new account, of course, it's going to be biased toward the left, and they're going to downvote things, that may have a conservative sway. But a lot of times those opinions are colored by like dog whistling racism or just a complete misunderstanding of the facts. And they're not wrong in that their ideas are being put down, but they don't realize that their ideas have no factual basis, or a lot of the people who are disagreeing with them is not just because of some, emotive reaction. It's more of they've done the research. They read the freaking Wikipedia article that explains it succinctly enough in, 2 paragraphs. Yeah. And they haven't done that research, so they're getting angry about it being put down for just spouting nonsense. And they're not wrong in that it's not like a truly neutral ground, but there is no truly neutral ground. There are better subreddits for those things. There are like, more nuanced discussion places online. But they all have their bias. They all have every community online has its sort of general set of accepted norms and ideas. And to challenge them usually gets you a lot of opposition, even in the neutral areas of the internet.
Some of us enjoy that.
Yeah.
Some get freaked out. So
I think the difference is when there's the absence. They don't allow those differences to show up. You can have a different opinion, but to totally isolate and cancel someone out because they're different, that there's a problem there. If it's not a discussion board, if it's just an information site of we're giving you this information, don't give us what you think about it, then yeah. But if you're open to discussion, let the discussion happen.
All right. Well, I think because it's been gone a half hour, we're going to try to get Chris on another show.
Okay.
And we will continue here. So let me turn off the YouTube and then start it up again. So you folks out there will get a fresh feed for just this show. I'll start with my face. Boy, are you lucky. It's burning up in here. From the studio in the bonus room above the garage on the north side of Cary at the foot of Mount Belzoni, this is the Triangle Talk Show. Episode 45, January 12th, 2019. Berning Question. I've done it to you audio audience again. I've given you a visual. Okay, I got to spell this for the audio audience. Berning Question. B-E-R-N-I-N-G. Berning Question. And I did it in the first thing I said, too. When I said, it's burning up in here. You couldn't tell that I meant that in my brain. B-E-R-N-I-N-G. I'm Gary Pierce. I am your official show snowflake. And got some guests here. You might guess from what I've been saying that this is sort of going to be a Bernie Sanders episode. And so here in the studio with me, what number are you at here, Dan? Lockwood.
Lockwood.
Not Dan,
Perfect.
Just Lockwood. Okay, you're in. For those of you that are watching, he's in the lower right-hand corner. For those of you that are listening, this is what he sounds like.
This is what I sound like.
Okay, climb up on that mic a little bit. It won't bite. And welcome back to the show, Elizabeth Crudup. And
Hi, everybody.
Here's what she sounds like.
That's what I sound like.
All right. And let's see. Can I once again, this will be a partly picture show and partly not. I encourage everyone to make this an audio program and not worry about the video. The audio is much more intimate. The video is just because I have 5 cameras. I might as well use, and YouTube is free to stream live on. Just listen to the audio. Before we start with the show, I was going to talk about. I've had a very political day. This is what I was out doing this morning. This is a march that took place downtown Raleigh from the Halifax Mall around a few blocks and then back to the Halifax Mall. I was not in the march. The march was in the right to life anti-abortion people. I was in this other group standing along the side that were the pro-choice people, some of them from a abortion clinic escort group that I volunteer with, and the rest of them just ordinary pro-choice people, all hollering at the folks that were walking by. And I accidentally held the button down a little bit too long on my phone, and it made a little jiffy. And so they did their march. They prayed a lot and walked on by, and I stood there along the side holding a sign and taking a few pictures. And guess what? Nobody convinced anybody of anything. It was no big surprise. You guys had an event today as well. I wasn't there, but it was the Organized for Bernie house party organizing launch. You're all trying to convince Bernie Sanders to run for president again.
That is what they said that we were doing there. Elizabeth, were you wanting to speak to that?
Yeah, we are all hoping we get the good news soon because right now we need some good news. Okay. These are some dark, sad times, and we need some good news, and that would be awesome news for those who have supported him all this time.
You're not the only people, because as I was looking up stuff for this, I came upon this thing. Let's see if I can make it go. I think it's going. Yeah. This is the Humanist Report.
I think it's safe to say that pretty much every single progressive including myself, we're all getting increasingly impatient, waiting for Bernie Sanders to
This just came out earlier
that
today.
he's running for president. I get it. It's only early January, but for the love of God, Elizabeth Warren already just announced Bernie Sanders. And I'm not the only one who's getting impatient, because Our Revolution officially announced that they're launching a draft Bernie campaign to influence him to run for president. Ruby Kramer of BuzzFeed explains.
Okay, and he goes on to a lot of detail. So you're not the only ones.
Yeah, we're ready. We're ready. We're ready to get to work. We're ready to get to work in an organized campaign. We've been working hard since, 2016. We have survived 2018 elections. We are ready to move on, transform the party, and work, get to work. And just go ahead and make it official, Bernie. That's all we're saying. Make it official.
So I'm going to speak a little bit out of school and say that you sent me email to propose doing this show. And in that email, you said Bernie is going to announce today.
Something good was supposed to happen. It's like he's teasing us.
That didn't happen.
Like, he's dangling like you dangle a toy in front of a cat. He's dangling it right there.
Is there any question he will announce, sometime, probably soon?
I don't think there's a question of that. In fact, when I organized the event this evening that Elizabeth and I attended, I was not expecting him to announce the entire time. What the movement of his organizers indicated to me was that his campaign is starting early, and they are trying to address some of the weaknesses of the campaign in 2016, was that he had no notoriety and he had no infrastructure going into mid 2015 at that point. This is several months earlier. He already has the ground game from before, and this is kind of waking it up again. It was my interpretation of it. And that's why I wanted to jump on the fact that nobody had made an event for the Raleigh area, was because I remember this being a big area of activism before in 2016. So it was worth starting that up again if nobody else was going to.
So this event that we're referring to today was nationwide. They did a webcast kind of thing, or Facebook thing, live at 4:00 approximately, from something called ACT TV, something I'd never heard of, but apparently it's a sort of it's like a bigger version of the Triangle Talk Show. It's a do-it-yourself television network.
Okay.
A little bit more to it than what I do, and maybe a little bit less than something like the Young Turks. I don't know if you watch the Young Turks.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of their stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they've got some production value. They try to be a TV network. So this, it was a little bit slapdash, but they got a bunch of people from around the country on, more or less, on video. And they're talking about getting things launched. And pretty much what you're saying now, it's, come on, Bern. Let's get this thing done. He's got his plan, doesn't he? I mean, we're really convincing him, or is he already ready to go? It's just a matter of whatever timing he's got.
That's what my thought process is if he's running, he's going to run. He doesn't need people to convince him of that. Or if he's decided already that he's not going to do it, the only reason he is putting on this persona that he might is just to energize the base a little bit more for whatever mostly progressive candidate shows up out of the field. Interestingly, I realized that last night Tulsi Gabbard announced that she was running for president, which is strange and definitely puts a bigger question mark on whether or not Bernie is going to announce, because she had left her position as the Democratic vice chair of the National Convention, or committee, excuse me, and did that to specifically endorse Bernie, which was an interesting move. And that was one of the most legitimizing things very early on in his campaign last time around. So
now she's running herself.
Yes.
So she won't be endorsing him.
I guess not. That'd be a little strange.
Yeah, I think you never know. It's a long way until serious primary season.
That's true. She might be deciding to, kind of hedge her bets, see maybe people like it. Maybe they resonate with the identity politics of her, as well as her military experience, I think is something that a lot of people are picking up on. Not that this is in any way substantial, but in reading on the Facebook comment replies to her announcement there are a lot of libertarians who came out and were like, I'm libertarian, but I'd vote for you. And so maybe that's an angle that she's going to try to push during some of the first debates, that she has that sort of that reach beyond progressives, right? And maybe she'll just see how it goes. But we don't know. I haven't seen anything about her campaign except for like the 2-sentence phrase that she had before the donate button on her website. So
yeah, those donate buttons, they come up early.
They do.
So I'm going to ask you guys. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, and I'm like, Tulsi is great. She's awesome, but we have to. I'm hoping that the party produces someone who can take on the Goliath that is the Trump machine, and I think Bernie, you can't say too much. Anything that needs to be said about Bernie has been said. There'll be nothing that will surprise us, so we won't really be focusing on that battle. With Tulsi, we'll all be learning about her as we go. As close an ally as she was to Bernie, as important as she is, at this point you have to look at what's important for the nation, and we need to come out of this, and we need to come out quick. And I think Bernie is our best bet. This is Elizabeth, the individual, talking. I realize I'm a party officer also, but the party officer part is down. This is just Elizabeth saying, I think we need, as a nation, we need to come out of this, and I don't see anyone else pulling us out.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more about what it is about Bernie that's got you going now, but I want to lead into that first by looking at the people that have already declared their candidacy, and then the long list of people, and I'm not going to even read them all because there's just too many of them, who are speculated to probably run. So we've got Julian Castro, who former U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, San Antonio mayor, never heard of him. John Delaney, former U.S. representative from Maryland, he was the first person to actually declare. He declared in August 10th, 2017, so way back last summer. And I encountered him on a podcast, 538 podcast, and was very impressed.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about listening to him on a podcast is I didn't know what he looked like. And I looked at his picture, and he went from being Superman to Nebbish Man. Boy, it worked better when I wasn't seeing what he looked like.
Wasn't that? I feel like that was a very big part of my AP US history class back in high school concerning the Nixon-Kennedy debates, right? Same kind of idea. I don't know what he looks like offhand, so I don't want to act like I'm...
He's got less hair than me.
I didn't realize that was a disqualifier, but...
Well, like I say, Nebbish Man. He does not look like strong presidential timber candidate. That shouldn't count. But it was a bit of a shock. I still liked what I heard in that long interview. So then there's the Tulsi Gabbard, representative from Hawaii. So that's going for her because I go to Hawaii all the time. Richard Ojeda, state senator for West Virginia. Donald Trump. I guess he's planning on running again.
What? How do you run from jail? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, well, early on, a lot of people thought he's just going to quit because he didn't expect to win, and he's not having fun, and it's way harder than he thought it would be. But I think he's finally found his footing. So I do expect him to run again, but there was a point where I wasn't the only one. My wife was convinced that he wouldn't make it a year. So
finding his footing is a very interesting way to put it because, do you find your footing when you're walking on hot coals? Because like right now, how many days into this government shutdown are we now? Like 27, something crazy like that?
Yeah, but he continues to be able to just say, I don't care. Screw you.
Oh, he does, and his base does not care at all what he does at all, except now, for a lot of them, it's their paychecks that are at stake here. Yeah. And I think that is going to be a huge difference than all of the other rhetoric that they were just, dismissed.
But
just to speak to that, we found out that the federal employees in Butner prison out there in the Creedmoor area were not getting paid.
Right. Along with all the rest of them.
These are the people that deal with the inmate population that's never making it out. So when you have this population, when you have these employees calling in sick, which a lot of them will do, or they'll just walk off, and you just have state employees left, can you imagine the potential for life being lost? It just, there's so many people who are like, we voted for Trump on the promise that he's going to take care of the veterans. He's going to take care of, the small businesses and all that. And now they're all going, what on earth? What's going on? At this point, I think there's a small awakening. And I really feel it gives an opportunity for the progressive movement to step up. Because I think I don't think, it was more of Donald Trump winning last time. I think it was more that there was no message from this other side, from the left, that would resonate with the smaller counties and in small town America. Not all of America is metropolitan. And he racked up in these voids, these vacuums of inactivity. And we want to make sure that there are no more vacuums, that we are active in every corner, every crevice of the state. And
Elizabeth has a mental list of talking points.
Ready to go.
I don't want to offend you, but
I'm sorry, but hey, I just can't. I just really don't want to exist another 2016 where I just cannot. I don't think I want to exist in that moment where we're all sitting and going, what could we have done? Because Trump has kicked everyone in the teeth. He has given every level of situation, whether it's healthcare or it doesn't matter. We've all gotten kicked in the teeth. The question is, what are we going to do about it?
That's what we're here for. Okay, Elizabeth Warren just
yes.
Announced the other day, and now there's a list of potential.
Oh God! How long do you have to? No, thank you.
It is huge. I'm not going to read them all, but I think there's like 40.
Oh
here.
My God! Okay, so there's a couple of the big ones though.
There's a few names we've heard.
This is a weird thing that they haven't updated the fact. Like Tulsi Gabbard's there on this list, and
and Julian Castro. So they haven't. Okay. This is from Ballotpedia. They haven't taken the names out of the potential that have actually declared, but there's a few. So what I was getting at was. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I only see I don't see anyone who could take on the Trump machine, because Trump will crush in every possible way whoever he feels is coming up against him. I don't think anyone really else has that trial by fire. Maybe Warren, in terms of trial by fire. Everyone else, I think, will just fall apart. Ojeda has Ojeda? He has so much anger. I wish that anger would calm down just a little bit. But he's no idea who he is.
I really don't either.
He's the guy from West Virginia who Trump showed up personally to campaign against. And Ojeda said, you know what? You came for my job, I'm coming for yours. And that's his platform. And he's already declared he's a Trump voter. He voted for Trump.
That is
not a good position to be in when you're going up against Trump. You're part of the reason he's in there in the first place.
So Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton's on the list.
What a mistake! But I wouldn't be like the fact that there are probably some pundits and some higher level people in the DNC that even floated the idea after 2016 that, they just need to give it another shot. I bet it happened for a bit. And that illustrates how fundamentally flawed their viewpoint is of the current political climate. Current political climate. It's just like Joe Biden. It's just, I guess, kind of illustrating what Elizabeth was just talking about here with these people, how standing up to Trump. That is so fundamentally wrong. You're trying to go up against somebody who, I mean, of course, we don't have an official diagnosis, but he's a narcissist, right? He's explores these sociopathic tendencies, and he wins with these just ridiculous, braggadocious, outrageous statements all the time. And he's never backed down. He's never apologized. He's never shown empathy for anybody. When can you ever illustrate that time period? So you're going against somebody who is not acting as a human being, but a caricature. And I have this fear in my heart that somehow, like, somebody like Elizabeth Warren is going to become the nominee for the Democratic Party. And I see the first debate, right? Like let's just explore that timeline for a moment. She becomes the nominee. She goes up onto the debate stage with Donald Trump, and she goes, "Donald Trump, you have 4,000 Pinocchio heads on the Washington Post, and you have a whole section of Snopes.com devoted to you because you are on record of lying like 5,000 times, right?" And you know what Donald Trump's going to do? He's going to look in that microphone, Pocahontas, and his base. Oh my God, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
That's all you got to do.
His base will.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is
that enough for him anymore?
Republicans did not, from my interpretation of the numbers from when I last checked them, the voting numbers from the presidential race in 2016, it's not like the Republicans had this sudden surge of human beings come out. The numbers of Republicans that voted for Donald Trump was roughly the same that McCain got and Mitt Romney got, proportional to like the population changes over time, right? So it's not like there was this sudden insurgent surge. It's not like Donald Trump awoke in this fire. It's just that Republicans showed up to vote for the Republican person. And the difference between...
Despite everything they saw.
Despite everything they saw, Republicans showed up, they voted for the R next to the person's name. Surprise, surprise. Whereas with Hillary, comparing her numbers to Obama's in either 2008 or 2012, she just got fewer Democrats to show up. Democrats did not show up for Hillary Clinton. It's not that she did anything wrong or she wasn't moderate enough or anything like that. It wasn't like Trump sparked a bunch of people to come out of the woodworks and, appealed to this working class rhetoric or whatever. It's just Republicans show up to vote. And Democrats did not show up to somebody who was not an exciting candidate, who didn't really promise any kind of vision for the future except, hey, look, I'm not Donald Trump. And so if the Democratic Party decides to run somebody who represents the same thing, hey, look, I'm not Donald Trump, I'm going to try to play to his level, it's going to be another disaster. And no one is going to rally around that.
Democrats did show up, and more of them than Republicans in raw totals.
Yes.
Just not in the right places.
Well, and that's always been the case. I mean, not literally always the case, but as far as modern politics is concerned, the last several election cycles, of course, more Democrats have shown up to vote. And I think most times Democrats have won the popular vote. But given gerrymandering and the Electoral College and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't matter when you have a couple of like flyover states dictating the entire thing. So it doesn't... Congratulations, Democrats. You got more.
I grew up in a flyover state.
Some people consider North Carolina a flyover state. So fair enough. I think they're valid areas of the country, but somebody in Wyoming should not have X amount of times the vote that I do. But Democrats, congratulations, you got more people to vote for you. Well, currently the system does not allow you to get the presidency by just having more human beings to come out. I think that's wrong.
You need a lot more.
But you need a lot more people. You don't need just a little bit more people.
You need more in the right places. You need to just play the Electoral College game.
But you don't even have to just play the game. You just have to get more people to show up and not stay home and not act like your candidate is a shoo-in guaranteed victory just because the other person is distasteful. And
as you said, a caricature.
And a caricature. And I thought Hillary was going to win in 2016. Of course,
everybody did, including Trump.
Everybody did, including Trump. And he won. And so for people to see that happening and not take a step back, breathe, and think about why that might be, and still employing the same tactics, just shows me that they haven't learned anything. Why are they calling the shots then?
Exactly, and that's what has to change. Who's calling the shots? That's what really has to change. I think we mentioned before that SEC meeting on January 26th, which is the state executive committee meeting for the Democratic Party on January 26th. That is where we elect who's calling the shots for us come 2020. And if we have the same old story, we cannot do the same thing and expect different results. You know, we have to engage and go in there and pull people who will be better captains of the ship, so to speak. Because if we have captains who are still steering using the same methods, we're going to hit those rocks once again and wonder, oh, how did we get here? And that's what I really want to just encourage people to do is get involved. Get involved, stay involved on your local level, get involved, come out to Charlotte if you can and see what it takes to put in our party leadership, because they're going to set the tone. They will be the drum majors for us come election time. And if we are trying to get rid of this and free ourselves and return America back to where it needs to be, it's going to take more than sitting at home and saying how bad things are. We're going to have to start showing up in some places, you know. So
Bernie is your guy by default because you were Bernie. Bernie was your guy in 2012.
And not just because he's Bernie, because he has a plan. What is going to happen the day after election? Because he has a plan. Right now, everyone else just are doing like you said. They were saying they're not Trump. They're not Trump. He's not going to win the election.
Yeah, they're also not on the show. And if they were, or one of their representatives were, I got a feeling they'd be arguing with you.
They would say, oh, they do have a plan. We do have this set of specific policies in mind that are all wonked out to be the most compromising possible thing to work with the very clearly, totally intellectually honest and willing to work with other people and care about other human beings, Republicans in office right now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most deadly things a politician can say when they're talking about policy is, it's on my website. Look at my website. No one's going to do that. But do we even care about policy?
Yes and no. Because
you were all of these people on this list have probably got policy 3 feet thick.
Yes.
Your argument is Bernie's got policy and the X factor, charisma, whatever you want to call it. He's not likable. I guess according to a lot of statistics, he's very likable, right? You know, he's polling really well. He's one of the highest rated senators. He's electable, but not. Boy, I like that guy. I've heard the opposite. Whenever I listen to him, it's like, oh, just his fingernails on a blackboard. I may agree with everything he says, and I would want the government to operate the way he says, and I would vote for him because of that. Mm-hmm. But I do not like to listen to him talk.
Do you not like to listen to him talk because it seems like he says the same thing every time?
I don't like the bombast.
Well, the bombast. What's bombastic about what he says?
The way he's talking to me on camera whenever he's making a political speech, it is full of bombast. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, everybody else is doing that too. I would, and if people did what I want them to do, they would lose, because they would look at the camera and they would tell me what I want to hear, what I need to hear, what they're talking about. That's what John Delaney did on this podcast. That's maybe one of the reasons why I liked him so much.
I think what really resonates with me and what I see as being very effective about his strategy is he knows that there's people like me out there that I've heard his speeches all the time. You know, when I've been to one of his rallies, I've been to all of them. He says millionaires and billionaires, and he sticks to the same stump speech.
Well, every stump speech is like that. And it's only fairly recently that we realize that's the case, because we can see them all now.
Sure. Yeah. But I think that's a criticism that a lot of like neoliberal types and a lot of moderate leftists give online that I've seen in the intellectual discussion spaces that they don't like about him, is that he just sticks to the same stump speech. And what they don't understand is he is offering a very easy soundbite for somebody who's not that into politics, but, you know, has a soul, or at least a set of ideas that they think need to be applied to the world, but don't know anything about the political system, right? They don't get all the wonkish policy, and they don't know all the procedures and stuff. But here's a guy who says, everybody deserves healthcare. Well, for this person who agrees with that, now they're like this guy. They're going to start listening to him more. They're going to think about the stuff he has to say. And me, I've heard him say he wants Medicare for all. I've heard him say that like 50 kajillion times. I mean, I like that about him, but that's not the point. The point is those speeches aren't for me. The point is to get people involved who have not been involved before, which those are your voters that are going to bring that Democratic majority total into a majority that's actually going to win an election, in my view.
Exactly. Those are the 1, 2, or 3 million in a state. You know, if they just remember that one thing, and he wants you to remember, that's why it's not a whole bunch of things he's asking you to remember. If you just remember that one thing of Medicare for all, if you just remember that one thing, you will show up that day and vote. And that's really the bottom line. It's like, if you remember that one thing and you show up and you vote, and we make it over, you're more likely than not to move closer to getting your one thing. You know, because the rhetoric, the noise will come in the closer we get to election. The ads, can you imagine what the TV ads will be like? Oh my goodness, will be.
I am shaking my head.
I'm just saying, we need to remember the one thing or the two things. That's all. When someone is considering later on, after receiving the barrage of noise from the media come campaign season, they need to be able to automatically think back to the one thing and have that resonate with them as they go into the ballot.
I think. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't.
Well, which in North Carolina, we have to, you know, we found the talking of the ballot, we found where the cheating went, where the cheating came from. But the thing is, with North Carolina, with North Carolina, I'm like, they are prosecuting now. But the Republicans have been doing this a long time. This is not a new thing, you know. This is not a new thing for them. I come from a county where many of the small town mayors are elected by votes by fax. So it's not something that the Republicans have been hiding. It's only that now someone decided to make a court case out of it.
When you say vote by fax, you mean like the facsimile machine?
Yes, they would go around and collect the early ballots, like this person collected the early ballots. And then they fax it in to the Board of Elections. Yeah. And at the Board of Elections, they'll say, yes.
No, we're talking about here is District 9, the district that has not been decided yet.
9 is not unique. The Republicans are like, why are you trying to hold it up? This is not the first time you've seen us do this.
Do you want to admit the Democrats have done the exact same thing?
The Democrats haven't done it. It's the Republicans who've always done it. That's their method.
Okay.
That's their method of election.
It's fair that
I grew up in Chicago.
Yeah, there are places where the Democrats have done that sort of thing. There are little corrupt pockets of machinery here and there, but I think the term for this is false equivalence. To act like the amount of Democratic tomfoolery that's out there, which, by the way, for the record, no, I do not condone. I don't want people to cheat or to break the law or anything like that.
So tempting, though.
Right? If you can't win through legitimate means, then why are you running in the first place? But
power.
Of course. Zooming out. How many states, how many elections have Republicans been engaging in this in comparison to Democrats? And I'm guessing
I grew up in Chicago.
I mean, that's one state, one metropolitan area in comparison to the entire state of, pick a southern state, pick North Carolina. The apparatus of Republicans in this state, it's effectively like a banana republic at this point compared to I'm sure Chicago is not run very well. I'm not up to speed with a lot of their local politics, and there's very likely shady
And
Democrats.
I'm talking about ancient stuff, the Daily Machine.
The Daily Machine.
Yeah, Mayor Daley, Richard Daley. This is 50s, 60s, 70s to 80s, and and then after that it became more of a toss-up. But Chicago was notoriously corrupt, and I think probably still is.
Sure.
North Carolina was in the solid hands of Democrats until 2010.
Would you say that what the Democrats had achieved is anything like what the Republicans are doing now?
Oh no, they did it much better. Once they figured out how and put some computer power into it, they became the masters of the art of gerrymandering.
Well, okay. So gerrymandering, that is something that simply needs to go away. But there's more than just simply gerrymandering that happens. There's all sorts of little riggings and things you can do along the way. It's an entire machine of it. I don't have a computer in front of me. I can't Google a ton of examples for you, but I know that there was a lot involving Scott Walker in was it Wisconsin? I'm mixing up
Walker
states
was
now.
Wisconsin governor.
Thank you. I know he had instituted a law against recounts if it wasn't within a certain percentage, and that actually worked against him, funny enough, in this election. But that's not that is in itself a substantial thing, but it's like this systemic implementation of policies to do that. You only have one of these two parties pushing voter ID laws, and you can argue, that both sides are backing it or opposing it for political reasons, but you can't argue that voter fraud is actually a problem, and one of those two sides is actually trying to declare that
not
that's a real
not
problem.
the kind of voter fraud that a requirement for an ID would fix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
Yeah, and everyone's saying that Wisconsin learned how to do what they were doing from North Carolina. So yeah, the gerrymandering got the Republicans into power, and then they went nuts.
Yes. So no, I don't agree with gerrymandering. I feel like there are better ways to implement that, and I don't like it when Democrats play the same crap. I think we need to implement laws that stop those, skeevy things from happening. But I think if you were to zoom out and do a comparison of, say, ethical disasters for one party compared to another one, it'd be a very lopsided scale. And I've seen little infographics out there that show like scandals between Republican administrations since, like, I guess Dwight Eisenhower compared to Democratic ones. And it's, like maybe one or two in, arrests or indictments compared to hundreds or a few hundred. What is that popping?
That's a good question. Let's see. Yeah, it's coming off the Skype. I wonder if is Chris
it me?
Chris back with us?
Yeah, I don't see Chris in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I just
Maybe
Skype weirdness.
Sensitivity thing. I think we have a big problem in a lot of media and a lot of online conversation falsely equivocating the actions of the two parties, and that paints this perception that both sides are bad. Okay, but there's stealing candy from a child bad, and there's mass murderer bad, right? There are different levels of ethical depravity, and I feel like it very heavily skews to the right when it concerns, I guess, legislation and governmental actions.
Yeah,
So.
I'm not going to argue with that. I think you're correct.
Okay.
You got to be careful.
Yes.
To not to fess up to your own side's foibles.
I mean, I'm a Bernie supporter, so doesn't that make me like an anti-establishment outsider or something, right?
Something like that. Yeah. Revolutionary.
I don't like the machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But what I want to ask about two directions. I want to find out what to make it specific to North Carolina, what you all are planning on doing.
Sure.
But I also want to talk about who you need to reach, because the constituent bases are pretty solid. These elections are decided on a very small margin in the middle that seems to swing back and forth. That's my observation.
Sure.
You know, I'm always going to be voting for Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to convince me. It will be a very odd Republican. I voted for a Republican senator in my first election because Daley made it so damn hard to vote for a Democrat in Chicago because it was so corrupt. So I voted for the most liberal Republican senator that there's been in decades, Chuck Percy.
And your justification for that vote, long story short, was anti-corruption, right? You didn't like the corrupt guy.
Although he had little to do with what was going on in Chicago because he was a state senator. But yeah.
I mean, you I guess zoomed out past just hardline ideology there and went for you want somebody who's in office that isn't interested in, or who's interested in doing the right thing, I suppose, even if they might be a little misguided.
Yeah, and plus I was a kid and I didn't know what I was talking about.
Of course.
So what I'm getting at is no political ad is going to sway me to vote Republican. I would hate to think a political ad sways me for anything.
Sure.
But I'm really sad to think that they will sway other people. Those people they're trying to grab. Most folks in the Democratic Party are like me. The advertising is going to be irrelevant to them. No, maybe it'll sway them a little bit in the primary, but it's certainly not going to sway them in the general.
Yeah, I mean,
you guys voted in 2012, right? You didn't sit home.
No, I voted in 2012. Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Yeah. Sorry.
That's the thing. That's the thing now.
Did you stay home?
No. Ooh, I was working work the whole time. I don't even know what town I ended up in that night come election results. But on the other hand, we really are going to build a movement, hopefully, on the platform, on what they get out of it. Because a lot of people in the middle, the reason they're in the middle is because they'll only lean towards the side they feel they'll get more out of if they're in power, you know?
Right now we're talking just about the primary. And
true.
the primary is all inside the party.
Oh, so you were, when you were talking about the middle there, you meant in the context of just the Democratic Party and the Democratic primary?
I'm not sure what I meant.
Okay.
Because realizing that, we are talking about the primary, that is the pulling the hearts and minds of people who already have their hearts and minds someplace. It's just which candidate they're going to support.
If you don't mind me, Elizabeth, did you want to say anything on that? Was that?
Well, I'll just say something real quick. I think the candidate that's going to win is the candidate that has the best ground game. And I think that's what Bernie's trying to put into place, the best ground game. We don't want the hoopla. We want the best ground game throughout America. And Bernie's going to build that best ground game. And I don't see anyone else meeting up with his ground game. To everyone else, we may just be data. But Bernie understands it's that ground game that's going to win.
If you don't mind me taking a couple of minutes to unpack something here, because I really think that there's something fundamental to what you suggested in the idea of the independents, that are swayed in each election.
Yeah.
I fundamentally disagree with that. I don't think that's actually how it works at all. And I think that there's just a weird sort of political science-y axiom thing that people have been kind of holding on to, clutching like rosary beads for the last 20 years, that is not aptly describing what's occurring. Because it's hard for me to imagine a human being that due to one minor issue or another is going to fundamentally shift so many core ideas about how they view the world that they're going to go from a progressive to a conservative, right? And I think a lot of times online when I see somebody who's like, the left is just so crazy about PC, right? I used to be a progressive and now all of a sudden I'm going from voting for progressive ideologies to a complete racist who hangs with the KKK because I don't like feminism, right?
That happens. Those are unicorns.
Those are unicorns, yes. But I think there are a lot of human beings out there who aren't going to just switch their ideology right like that. And I think Democrats have been fundamentally mistaken by trying to pretend that they can sway like center-right Republicans away from Republicans. Like if a conservative likes a Republican for the conservative ideologies they have, why would they vote for somebody who is a Republican light, that it's offering like some of what they want, but less than the guy who's just simply offering what they want?
I don't know how many of them there were, but there were Obama Trump voters. Obama in 2012, Trump in 2016.
Well, that's, I guess, what they were probably doing there was speaking to it from an economic perspective, right? I imagine that those
economic
are people
or charisma.
I mean, charisma, sure, but
maybe some gender bias.
I just, to me, that they had to be voting with their wallet in a context like that, because they're not going to fundamentally shift their views. If they were like voting for Republicans because of like socially conservative principles, like say, they were anti-abortion or were huge evangelicals and were maybe homophobic, they wouldn't suddenly switch to a Democrat, right? They must have already had probably tolerable viewpoints of leftist positions on that, or just didn't care. And so that became a question of economics. And so those progressive principles had them come out for something like that, rather than, I guess, somebody who had like a tough voice. But it's really like, I think focusing on swaying the middle, this like, small group of people who maybe are swayed by nuanced positions between two parties that are roughly the same in this context, like, you're missing out on so many people who just don't vote, because we have it. You'd have to look up the numbers right now, but isn't it something like maybe, I think, 40 to 60% of the voting eligible population just doesn't vote in each election?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What do those people believe? Why are they not voting? I feel like there's
one of my podcast co-hosts doesn't vote, because I do a show and it's got some politics in them, and we talk about movies and we talk about sports and on the politics stuff. You can get to them a little bit, but you can't get them really synced in.
So whether or not somebody votes, the decisions that are being made by other people who do vote are going to directly affect their life, their economic well-being, their health, and, society around them. So it does affect them whether or not they vote. And that's, I think, something that's just not actively
And we scold them about it, but they don't pay any attention.
They might not. But what if, instead of worrying about the small subsect of people who do vote and are in this like little unicorn space where somehow somebody who's charismatic enough but giving the same moderate principles makes one or two people switch sides, what if instead you go for that chunk of people who just aren't turned on to politics yet? And that is what a lot of progressives are doing, what the Bernie movement is doing, and why I originally backed him, or one of the many reasons, I suppose. Not that I don't want to sound like just like some diehard fanboy here, right? I just thought he was great at activating a lot of people who otherwise weren't into politics. I mean, hell, I looked at it like a spectator sport, and all of a sudden I hear this guy announcing his run, and I look at his platform, I'm like, I resonate with all of this. This all makes sense to me. I have a politician who finally is giving the platform that I believe in, not this watered down version. I'm going to go volunteer for this. This is what I wanted to do. And a lot of people who were in that campaign were in the same boat. They had never participated in politics before, but here's somebody who's coming out and giving a platform that they believe in, not some watered down version because the people in charge were so concerned about these middle wonkish folks who will switch their entire ideologies, right? They went for the folks who had never participated before, who felt disillusioned. And I mean, the Bernie campaign gave Hillary a run for her money.
Yeah.
They didn't win, but they got a run for their money. They were not expecting that.
And there were polls that concerned me that considered him more electable. I tried to pretend that I didn't see them, but I saw them.
I think they were. I think it's true. I mean, of course, we can't go back in time and have A/B testing for candidacies. God, I wish we could. But
mostly I could ignore it because none of us worried about it. We're all sure Clinton was going to win.
I was worried about it, but I was just hoping that the pundits were right. And I mean, that's why I campaigned so vehemently. And I was frustrated with a lot of what felt like rhetoric and actions against Bernie's campaign from a lot of establishment Democrats, like saying, he's not a real Democrat, right? And doing all of these little procedural things to just give him a disadvantage, because it's like, this dude's resonating with the base, and you guys want a lot of the same policies here. And just not to rope you in on this, but earlier before we were live, you had said that I think you would have voted for Bernie or voted for like a more progressive candidate in a certain situation if he had been...
If Bernie had won the primary,
okay, yeah,
I would have gladly voted for him.
Okay, yes. I'm just curious, and I won't take offense to this. Would you, early on in the 2016 primary season, were you more for Hillary or for Bernie?
Hot seat.
I voted for Hillary in the primary.
Okay.
I take it back. I voted for Kasich in the primary.
Okay.
Because I was pretty sure Hillary was going to make it, and I wanted to vote against Trump. So I'm registered unaffiliated, so I could take a Republican ballot.
I've done that before. I totally understand.
You can only do that if you're registered unaffiliated.
Yeah.
And so then I said, well, who is polling better than any other Republican has a chance of at least reducing Trump's numbers, if not beating him in the North Carolina primary? And I said, Kasich, easy. Absolutely did not agree with anything Kasich said. You know, he could say the sky is blue, and I would say, no, I think the sky is red. But he looked like someone whose numbers could put a dent in Trump. Turns out that didn't happen.
It did.
It didn't help me much.
Sure.
My vote didn't help him much.
But you voted for Hillary in the primaries, which
I would have. I voted for Kasich.
Okay.
I would have voted for Hillary had I decided to take a Democratic ballot.
Okay, so you preferred Hillary there, but you expressed to me that you...
But no fan. I wasn't a fanboy.
Okay, that's fine. But you had a preference there, and you made that preference, and there were a lot of Democrats, of course, enough to make Hillary the winner of the primary, that preferred Hillary Clinton. But I think what I remember from a lot of polling, again, I don't have the data in front of me right now, but a lot of the sentiment was shared that Democrats would have held their nose, if you want to call it that level of opposition or revolting, I guess, reaction to Bernie being the nominee. They would have voted for him. A lot of Democrats would have just shown up and voted for him, but a lot more who decided to vote third party or just didn't show up would have voted for him too. And so what you have there is you have the Democratic base that came out for Hillary Clinton plus the extra that would have made the Democratic nominee become president, right? And for some reason, I think a lot of the establishment Democrats have not understood that tactic, even though Republicans have been manifesting it for years in these elections. They've gone further and further to the right. And what does their base do? All of those moderate Republicans who act all high and mighty, Trump's rhetoric. Oh, this is awful. How could you say this about minorities? And they vote for him.
They still vote for him.
They vote for him. And you, sorry, Elizabeth,
I think I realized Hillary was in trouble when, they would have these impromptu rallies, and she had one. She had a few in right here by the North Carolina Museum of Art. And she couldn't fill the stadium. She couldn't fill the auditorium. Couldn't fill it. And again, when we had one out there in
what
Stanford,
point in the campaign was that? Was that in the primary?
This was a week. This was a week before the November. This was end of October, mid to end of October.
Okay.
When you realize that after being involved in both the 2008 and 2012 election, where you saw when the volume of people that just showed up to fill the room, and Hillary couldn't pull that. And I think the last event, she had to have Bernie show up, and people were coming to see Bernie. The conversation in the room was, "Oh, Bernie is here, not we're coming to see Hillary." We realized we're in trouble. At least those who are working campaigns, we realized we're in trouble here. But the mainstream tried to, I guess, keep a stiff upper lip about it. And we can't relive that. As I keep going, we can't relive that. We have to do what the people want and give them what they need. They have to feel like they ate if they come to a meal with us. They have to feel like they ate, not that they were in a room and food was for everyone else except for them.
It's an interesting metaphor there.
Do you think Hillary was doomed by Comey?
No.
No. Hillary was. Do you remember? Do you
I think
remember?
I'm hearing the party line here.
Party
do you
line.
remember three strikes, you're out legislation? The three strikes and you're out during the Bill Clinton administration. Hillary introduced three strike or helped bring about.
Judicial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people have lost family because of that one situation? Forget the Comeys, forget all that other stuff. Do you know how many people lost their family? What they were calling the Work First program, it doesn't allow parents, mothers of children to spend more time with their infants. It forces you back into the work. It makes you go back into the workforce faster. That was a Hillary initiative.
Those are all really important things to the people that they affect, but they just don't affect a percentage of people that are going to sway an election.
Yeah, I'm afraid that I don't think a lot of people who are adversely affected by that understand that those are the policies that are causing such a huge problem for them. Like they wouldn't know that.
Exactly.
So I don't know if that was the issue, and I don't think that it was like one thing like Comey's announcement.
You would admit that it hurt.
Oh, it absolutely hurt. And
But you don't think it made the difference?
No.
Well, okay. It made the difference in that moment. It was at a time where Hillary Clinton was in the IU, or I'm sorry, I can't like acronym right now. She was in intensive care.
ICU.
Where's my head today? So she was in very critical condition, and something like that, an October surprise like that, would sink her because it was such a shaky ground. And then all of a sudden it's not that all of a sudden people switched alignment and were like, now I like Trump. It's just a lot of people were like, I'm so tired of this, I'm not going to show up to vote.
Yeah.
That's what the numbers show. So I don't think that doomed her, because why was that one little blip the reason why that campaign sunk? Why is it that something so, if you look at the polling numbers and stuff, it wasn't a huge dip. It was just enough of a dip. And why did we ever allow it to become...
she did win the popular vote. So
yes, of course she did.
In the wrong places.
In the wrong places, yes. But that little dip right there, why was it that we had a candidate that was so close to having something small like that?
Okay. So before I ask you guys what you're going to do in North Carolina, and bring it down to the nuts and bolts of a campaign for Bernie Sanders here in North Carolina.
Sure.
Let me ask you what you think about the destructiveness of a primary.
The destructiveness of a primary. Would you elaborate on that?
The party that's out of power will typically have a lot more candidates. Trump may have a little bit of opposition, but he won't have much. 2012 was unusual because both parties had open primaries. There was no Obama had to retire, so there was no incumbent that was going to be running. This year, Trump will run as the incumbent. The Democrats will paste each other. They'll beat each other with clubs trying to win the primary. Is that a good thing, bad thing, or just what can we do?
I think that it was overhyped how much, a lot of folks, again, I don't want to speak entirely in anecdotes here, but what the sentiment I gathered was that a lot of Hillary folks believed that Bernie simply just having a different ideological platform somehow was damaging to Hillary enough to where suddenly you didn't have people supporting her. Like he somehow made her less palatable as a candidate, right? And I don't. Sorry.
I was going to. I think that's the point.
Yeah, but I don't think that's actually the case. I don't. Why is advocating a different set of policies hurting her as a candidate? If more people want those things, I don't think that is damaging to her anyway, because at the end of the day, people would rally behind that if it was taken. Sorry, you have something you're going to say with that?
Yeah, and if that's what it was, that would be fine. But it's not what it is. It's shellacking in the negative ads, and it's not all from the candidates. Sometimes it's the PACs. But that's a
and that's the thing. Bernie's not taking that PAC money. The PACs can throw what they want at him.
Yeah, they can still put ads on the air.
Yeah,
got the T-shirts. You know, with a Bernie campaign, while the others are shellacking themselves. You know, I don't think anyone has on the Democratic Party side. I don't think anyone has a candle to hold when it comes to trying to come up against Bernie Sanders. I do not think so, because there's nothing they can really say, because anything they try and bring up is already encompassed by Bernie. Anything they try and influence in terms of a platform, we already have the most progressive platform we've ever had, thanks to the exiting 2016 Bernie campaign. They made sure the DNC adopted the most progressive platform.
Yeah.
We already have all that
Can the
stuff
most
in
progressive platform win a general election?
Yes. Well, the most progressive platform will win a general election because it speaks to the heart of what the American people want, and
That's what everybody
it has
says.
to be a candidate that. It has to be a candidate that, or a set of candidates that will produce, or are more likely than not to turn that platform into public policy. There's no one. Doesn't matter how long that list runs. There's no one outside of a Bernie right now from the left side that is closer to bringing that platform into public policy. You know, everyone else would be, would be a snack for the Republicans come general.
I don't hear this described in the general pundit chattering class very much, but I remember I'm Just a Bill. Remember the song, I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill? The distance between a candidate, a presidential candidate's policy positions and actual legislation is so long, so far, that we listen to what they say, but when they finally get something done. How many things did Obama get done? He got a small handful of significant legislation, with the Affordable Care Act being the shining star.
Sure.
If we were to go back and look at the things he ran on, well, most of those things never happened. Most of the things any presidential candidate runs on never happen.
Well, that's the progressive difference. That's the progressive difference. The progressive movement, or those who are now officially progressives, is that we will hold your feet to the fire.
I don't know so much about that, in that I don't think that having a progressive in office is suddenly going to see like this spurning of legislation at a crazier rate than we've seen before. What I think that is going to happen is you're going to just have more people in office that are going to back a lot of, harder policies. They're going to come to the negotiating table not from the compromised position, which is what a lot of establishment Democrats do now. The fact that we came to the table in 2010 with the strength that we had in the federal government, with a Republican health care bill, right? Romney Care.
Yeah.
We came to the table with Romney Care when in 2010, what could have happened if the Democrats came to the table with universal health care, for instance? Not that was politically appetizing at the time, but let's just, what could have happened if we started with that and Republicans went, no way, like they did with Obamacare. And then when we worked down to the middle, we got something that covered more folks than what the Affordable Care Act eventually ended up doing. And, we still had the public option in there instead of having that stripped away in part of the negotiations here. Because we came to the table with this moderate version of a policy, of course, Republicans are not going to like it, and it was stripped down further. Why do we think that coming to the table with the middle ground thing that we think Republicans are going to let us get to is going to suddenly have them go, yep, all of a sudden I agree with this. Let's do it right now. No pushback at all. Why? When has that ever happened?
So you're talking about a relatively typical negotiating tactic, which is when I say it's going to cost you 85, you'll say I'll give 35, not 75.
And then we get down.
We end up at 50.
We end up in the middle. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So sometimes it works.
Sometimes it works.
In today's political climate, where heels are dug in, anchors are planted, is that still going to work?
When has compromise worked out in favor for liberals? Well, I mean, really, like, when has the left actually benefited from compromising with obstructionist Republicans for the last decade? It hasn't. It's been every single time we've had a watered down version of something the Republicans have wanted. And now we're getting to the point where the national conversation is being framed. Trump wants this border wall, and he is just vehemently advocating for this wall, and he will not sign any compromise legislation, even that Republicans are putting forward. And now all of a sudden you have some Democrats going, well, why don't we compromise with this? Why don't we just do a little bit? Just give them some of the money to get the government up. What I'm saying is they're never going to stop unless we push back with the same amount of force.
Exactly.
Because all we do when we come to the table immediately wanting to compromise without them bucking at all is we get further and further into, well, I mean, you can describe it as soft fascism in a lot of ways. I mean, I really think a lot of the policies that Donald Trump has implemented and backed and the way the Republican Party has shifted so far to the right, if it's not counteracted with strong progressive policy, something to push for, you're going to just keep slipping further in that direction because they've never been intellectually honest or genuine enough to come to the table to actually negotiate something that people want. They don't care about keeping the government running. No,
it doesn't affect their lives directly, really. And I keep wondering, why have they never said if there's a government shutdown, our elected officials in Congress don't get paid until the government reopens? Why is that, that should be a high incentive. Hold on, give me one moment. Let me click that off.
I don't know if I agree
that should be an incentive. If you can stop them,
most of these guys most of these guys, except for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who couldn't afford rent until she got her salary, most of those guys, they won't feel it.
Yeah, if anything, that benefits people who are more entrenched to have that kind of a policy in place. So I'm not sure I agree with that, but I went on a bit of a tirade there. So
it's fine. You're good. Are you comfortable? Feeling good here?
So certainly not as nervous as I was before, huh?
Yeah. You're doing great. I don't think they're going to compromise no matter what. I don't think you can find a meet in the middle any place. I think it's a matter of getting enough votes that they're become irrelevant.
Okay.
Can that be done?
Not by coming out with a watered down position. I don't think so, because it hasn't worked. How many seats and how many governorships have we lost since 2010? I mean, it's so many. And we're not changing the tactic. And finally, the left is energized enough to pull somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez out there. And Bernie gave the Hillary establishment a run for their money, right? Does that not indicate anything? Does that not highlight that there is a sentiment out there that we need to push for more, more progressive policies? Especially considering how drastic a situation that we're in with global climate change.
Exactly.
We can't incrementalism our way to something that's going to stop that. You can't slowly pass over the next 50 years something that is a watered down version of the Green New Deal. What that's going to leave us with is hundreds of millions potentially, or at least just a few dozens of millions of people, if that's a more acceptable number, of people displaced all around the world because of drastic climate change. I don't see that as being acceptable in any form. And to not recognize the gravity of the situation and not push forward with the intense sentiment that we need to express for something as dire as this is such a critical mistake by the left. It's such an easy rallying cry. And anybody who's, even if you're a conservative, you still breathe the same air we do, you drink the same water, and there are so many people out there in eastern North Carolina whose homes have been devastated. 2 years, back to back with these giant hurricanes. They will vote for people who are interested in stopping that from becoming worse. I think it can be clearly communicated, but you have to have the party rally around these strong ideas for solving the biggest problems in the world instead of, I don't know, what is the moderate Democrat position? What are they even looking for right now, except for I guess patching up the holes that Donald Trump tore up? But then what do we have if we had a moderate Democratic force come in and work their magic, and they had free reign, right? They just for a day, they became kings and set up legislation to get everything that their platform gets us to. We're back to what, 2015? Yeah, we still have so many massive problems occurring, right? We still have so many issues that have not been addressed. We still have Flint. We still have climate change. We still have this economic disparity that is hurting people on a day-to-day basis. We still have a healthcare that it's not covering like 10 million people. How is that acceptable? How can we not want to push for more? And that is a sentiment that I think a lot of people are feeling. And I think people can rally behind that. I really do.
And that's the thing. This is not the time to be moderate. We have been taken so far into the deep end of, I want to say despotism. We are so far right. It's going to take a hard left agenda to get us, back into that moderate zone. We have been thrown way, way, way out there. And not to pull us back, we have to pull back with greater, not equal, but greater force. And this is not the time for moderate. No.
I consider it a victory if we get this country to the point where our policy debates are between leaving the Affordable Care Act as it is and implementing universal health care, or when we are...
So the Affordable Care Act is the enemy?
No, absolutely not. It was a great first start, and it was necessary to have something better than what we did before. And I'm glad that
it was a compromise.
Well, it was the conservative option, right? And
which they still voted against as many times, hundreds of times, or 50 times.
They did, and they're going to keep voting for anything that a Democrat puts forward. They're just going to vote against because there's not actual cohesive ideology to the decisions they make. It's playing to their base. What needs to happen is when we get the national conversation to a point where we're not entertaining these ridiculous ideas, like, for instance, arming teachers to try to deal with gun violence in schools, or putting people suspected of being illegal immigrants or crossing the border to seek asylum in concentration camps, to entertain these thoughts. Or,
those things appeal to people that don't think hard about politics.
They don't think hard about politics.
They can be scared into accepting those premises.
Why are we allowing people to have a platform to give these really fascist or just completely nonsensical ideas any sort of legitimacy?
Because it makes us feel safe.
It's a false sense of security.
Well, of course, but they don't understand that. And it appeals to our baser instincts, and it makes us feel safe, and it is a lot easier to be afraid of something than to embrace it.
Do you think a lot of the people who think that a wall or putting people into these concentration camps, do you think that they have been legitimately presented with alternatives, or do they think that that's the only way to keep things stable?
They don't want to hear any alternatives. They want the easy answer. Conservatism has always been, to me, about the easy answer.
Okay.
Well, I don't think they've been presented with an alternative. That's what it is. It's the absence. We're like, what else can we do? That's how they feel. What else can we do? This is all we can do. What else can we do? And we have to answer that. What else can we do? We have to give them another extreme alternative, like the DACA or what happened, before. We have to have an extreme but positive answer, because right now there is no answer when it comes to what else can we do. The left hasn't answered that as strongly as they have, as strongly as the other side has said, well, this is your only alternative, I'm
afraid of using language like extreme for things like DACA. I think we need to frame it as being a narrative. It is a direction for us to push in, right? We need to be advocating for the next big step in progressive policies, because those are things that people can rally behind. Because what we're doing in progressive policies when we're advocating for these things is offering a solution to societal problems in a way that just cutting taxes and praying the free market is somehow going to fix the thing is not going to work. And it hasn't worked. But when mainstream Democrats are not offering solutions to these problems, it doesn't look like they're doing anything at all. Even if what they're saying is defending the status quo or slowly incrementally changing something, what are they going toward? Right?
Exactly.
They're not giving that narrative. And maybe that's just a communications issue, right? Maybe the Democrats just need to get better about solidly defending their neoliberal, moderate, leftist viewpoints or something, but they're not doing it right now. There's no cohesiveness. There's no narrative of we're trying to better things for the people who are most adversely affected.
I mean, they'll try for the sound bites and then point you to their website for the details.
Unless you're a progressive.
To go back to
you do that quick. Do that quick. But there's no concrete. When someone comes up to this with a point of concern, you should have a concrete, direct answer for that point of concern.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I'm very glad you asked the question. Please go visit my website.
Yeah.
No.
But it's got to be quick. It's got to be quick and
yes,
concise.
To tie in a lot of the rambling we've done about crazy progressive things here.
Must be like a talk show.
I suppose so. That list you have right in front of you there on Ballotpedia of all of those Democratic candidates, all of these hopefuls and discussions, and even the people who have identified themselves as running for president currently. Are there any major differences in their platform? What are they pushing for that really sets them apart from the rest of the field?
I mean, there may be some that are solidly for universal health care. There may be some that specifically would call out free college education, and some that don't. There are going to be some differences between them. Some may say, well, free college education through community college, but we're not going to put you at Harvard.
Okay. And I think that sentiment right there is, again, getting back to the simplified version of, the negotiating, right? The haggling. When you come to the table with that kind of watered down thing, that doesn't get anywhere. And I think a lot of people in the moderate left think that radical progressives can't do the same thing, can't negotiate. Because Bernie got into office, he's not an idiot. He's been in government for, 30-something years, right? He knows how it works. And if he has to compromise to get to the moderate leftist policy, that's still an improvement from where we were before. But he didn't start from that point, right? It's getting things done, but it's advocating for a direction. It's using the bully pulpit to get people organized and rally behind a sentiment. And I think that is really his strength there, and why so many people on that list are going to fail as proper candidates, because they're not doing that, because the Democratic Party as it currently stands doesn't really stand for much. When almost no people on that list advocate for Medicare for all, that's patently false and going off of old data, because you could pull up a study right now that shows that a majority of Americans agree with the concept of Medicare for all. A majority of Americans, not a majority of Democrats, a majority of Americans. Yeah. Why are we not adopting that as the policy then?
I'm not looking at specific people because I don't know, but I keep hearing news stories now and then that say most of the president of the top tier Democratic hopefuls are recommending a single payer type program.
Do you think we would have gotten there unless Bernie had been shouting for it?
That's what I'm about to say. When they say top tier, what top tier? I think there's Bernie, and then there's a big gap, and then everyone else starts. There is no top tier. There's just Bernie, and then you have a big gap, and then you have everyone else.
It's important. Yeah. I think it's important to clarify that we're not in this because I like a specific socialist Brooklyn Jew or something, right? It's not the specific person that we're rallying behind. It's the ideas that he has been vehemently pushing for decades. What I loved about him, what originally made me decide to back him so wholeheartedly, is when I heard him talk his points, I go, Okay, yeah, but what did he say like 10 years ago? I looked it up. Oh, he voted against the Iraq War. Let me go back another 10 years. Oh, he was against the welfare reform and he wanted to address, rampant crime problems. Let me go back another 10 years. Oh, he was advocating for universal health care back in the 80s. He was advocating for all these positions consistently for years because there is an ideological consistency about him. And that honesty means there's no surprises when he gets into office. Maybe I don't like everything he does, but I know what he's going to do, and I know that he has a genuine interest in getting something done that benefits more than himself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One advantage I see at this point to the history that we've had recently is if I thought that maybe he was just kind of a whack job, a little bit of a whack job, out there beyond the orbit that I was comfortable supporting, well, not anymore.
He is, yeah.
That's what I am. I tell you what. Do you know what he? What's going on? I'm like, whoo, yeah. Whack job no longer. Bernie don't even enter the realm of whack at this moment. Whack has been redefined.
Yes. Okay, I brought down the house with that one. What's going to go happen in North Carolina with you guys? Everybody in your group is saying run Bernie run, which he's either already decided not to announce yet, and he's got his timetable, or probably he's made his decision. But assuming that he decides to go. Because you'll spend a little time saying, "Come on, Bernie, let's go." Assuming he puts his hat in, then what happens? What happens here in North Carolina?
I definitely want to give Elizabeth the floor when it concerns talking about becoming delegates at the precinct and the county and the state level, because Elizabeth has a lot of knowledge about that. But I think to speak to the history of I guess post-2016 to now, what had occurred is people realized that we can't just hope for the presidency, right? The president alone cannot change everything and make everything that we want to happen. People became inspired by him running unabashedly, what are the words here? He was unafraid to back progressive ideals, okay? And he was not apologetic for believing in these ideas, and people respected that. People became inspired and people ran in their own districts. They ran not just at a national level, but at the state level, even for town councils. You had millennials getting involved as well, still are. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the biggest example of that, but not the only one. I know plenty of millennials who got elected at state level governments here and there, and you have the mayor of Fayetteville. You have people getting engaged because they see that they can run on ideas that they truly believe in and not play some game. And they realized that you can't just make change at the national level. You have to work your way up. You have to build progressives in every facet of life, because the person who is on your town council makes, in a lot of ways, decisions that impact your day-to-day life that way greater than somebody at the national level. And that is, let me put a big asterisk on that one, because, of course, us getting into a war or something to that effect, or signing a bill that fundamentally changes healthcare, for instance, those are big things. Those have huge impacts. But like controlling, having a say over the buildings that are constructed, or the zoning of different things, or, how much industry we bring into a town to and we change an ordinance to allow for a certain amount of air pollution, or we don't test our water regularly, or we don't fund that kind of thing, or we don't invest in public infrastructure so people who live in rural areas can't have jobs in city centers. Those decisions are critical to people's day-to-day lives, and I think a lot of progressives recognize that and have since been involving themselves in a more local level. And we now have a plan to get more people involved at the local level and recognize where we can have a huge effect in the Democratic Party. And it's not a subversion. It's not an invasion. It's not bringing down the whole system and causing revolution. It's recognizing the mechanisms that exist in our government and utilizing them to advocate for progressive values. And on that note, Elizabeth, you have...
Mr. Lockwood has also got a pretty good stump speech.
See, but and that's what it is. All we advocate is that people show up. I am part of the Progressive Caucus of the North Carolina Democratic Party. We are really the ones that have embodied these progressive policies and are looking to make sure our elected officials work to turn them into public policy. What we just tell people is it doesn't take much. Show up. Show up at a city council meeting, see where your elected officials stand. Show up at a county commissioner meeting. Just show up. Then when you see the announcement, I think we're required to put it in the newspaper. Keep in touch with the local newspaper. When your party announces that they're going to have a precinct meeting, show up at that precinct meeting. Show up and volunteer to be elected for one of the leadership positions. It's not hard.
Yeah.
It takes, in most places, it takes just 7 people or 5 to 7 people to get a precinct organized. All we're saying is show up at every level and every opportunity you can. You do not have to be an expert. You do not have to have ever done this before. All we say is show up if we want a progressive platform.
Even that is a many steps beyond what most people want to do. If you want to get somebody elected, you got to be pretty dedicated to get into the position of even going to these meetings. And once you've gone to one, not be so turned off by the process.
Mm-hmm. No, you don't have to go to these meetings. You have to go to one meeting. Show up for
right one
meeting. Just show up for one meeting. That if you feel so inclined as to attend 6 or 7 or 8 after that, great. Well, you're welcome. But show up for one meeting. One. I think we can all do that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the sentiment of if you want to start to get your life together after being in crippling depression, just start with making your bed every day, right? Yeah. It's the first step. And
we've talked about that on the show recently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Admiral McCready.
There's something meta right there. Oh yeah, I loved that speech. That's a good one. And honestly, that after listening to it, it made me commit to doing that. I tried, but was floundering around with it, and I'm like, he makes a valid point. I can take 60 seconds out of my day and rush that. But I think that is the underlying thing that Elizabeth is getting at with what she had said there, is that what we're trying to do is encourage people to just take that first step. And not everybody's going to take the second step. But if you get 10 people to go out to that first meeting and one of them becomes a delegate, well, that's one more delegate than we had before, somebody who's going to get involved.
And their effort will then be compounded by hundreds and hundreds in bringing people to vote.
And when they're in that position, then they can reach a hand down and help bring somebody else through the process. And so it's disseminating the information that makes it easier for people to understand how to get involved, how to make sense of the miasma of bureaucracies and different levels of government and, all the little nitty gritties and interweavings of the local government procedures.
Got a cat.
I'm more worried that somebody shows up at whatever government meeting they decide to go to and they see how the sausage gets made and says, I'm going home.
Yeah. You're going to have people who do that, and they're not wrong. It's not a very pleasant thing to get involved in the nitty gritty of it, but there's a difference between, politics just being ingrained and tough and whatever, and then just being okay with the dirty aspects of it, right? Being okay with the nepotism and the money passed around, the lobbying, all that kind of stuff. The corruption. I'm using blanket terms here, and we can get very specific in the details. But you have a general sense of what I'm talking about, right? The things that people are against the corruption in government, they're against big money, all that. We can have a very complicated process that involves all the different levels and whatever, but not be okay with those things. So we can recognize that it's tough and that. Does that make sense?
And then it all boils down to somebody making an announcement about the validity or not of your email server, and that changes the election. And I go, but we're paying attention to the wrong things.
We are.
Okay, we've done our 90 minutes.
Sure.
We have barely scratched the surface. Have you had fun?
This was great.
Yeah. Elizabeth, I know you're having fun.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll do some more of this and see if we can pull your audience out there and find some people that want to argue with us. I don't know if I've held up the argument end.
I didn't mean to run off on so many little tirades there. If there's more you want to know or, specific things, I'm always happy to talk about this kind of stuff.
I love this. This is great.
Awesome.
And like I said, we'll do some more. But we're at 90 minutes, and that's probably all the audience can stand. So thank you very much. And you guys are, let's see if I can push the buttons right. There's Elizabeth. And tell people who you are. And do we need to tell people where to find you or anything like that if they say they want to? Every show always has a who are you and where do I get a hold of you?
Oh, well, you can. I'm Elizabeth Crudup, progressive, staying very active. You can find me at, I think we started an organization called Take Back NCO2. So on Twitter, I am at Take Back NCO2. On Instagram, I am Take Back NCO2. But also, you can find me on Facebook, just Elizabeth Crudup. And of course, if you go to the Progressive Caucus Facebook page, you can also contact me through there. And as our revolution makes its way, you'll be seeing more of me. My phone number and contact information are always listed on my pages, so you can always find me.
You're brave.
Oh, yeah. Find me. Come on. Bring it.
All right. Lockwood.
This is Daniel.
Known to your mother as Daniel.
Basically. Too many Daniels out there. Lockwood is easier, I feel like. So my Twitter handle is DULockwood. My email is dulockwood@gmail.com. And basically that's my professional, putting myself out into the world username for pretty much anything that's out there. And happy to talk email and stuff like that. I don't rep one specific group. I try to kind of help out a bunch of little local initiatives here and there. But I'm happy to talk with people, especially people who don't agree with me. I feel like I can be better about asking questions and getting to know somebody and really having a good discussion and getting at the heart of what people believe rather than just kind of spouting off my ideologies that I did here sometimes.
I like the discussion. I like to avoid the snark, and I don't like the scoring points.
Yeah, because it's not about that. I've never understood the idea. Like, I hate debates. Really hate debates as a concept because nobody goes into a debate going, I'm ready to change my mind with whatever the other person's saying. I'm ready to hear them out. No, they want to see their preferred candidate drop the mic, windmill slam somebody. And it just, that's
all we're doing on Facebook.
It reminds me, it's like we're reverting back to like pre-society times and where like two people fought to, determine the outcome of an argument. How is that in any way like civil? How has anybody learned anything from that? How do we come to a conclusion where everybody benefits?
We're better than that.
We're better than that.
All right. I'm this guy, Gary Pierce. I'm still the snowflake. Do I have enough credibility to even be the snowflake, or am I too moderate? You know what a snowflake is?
I do know what a snowflake is. I don't know.
I thought I was a snowflake. Now I'm not so sure.
We'll get you there.
I was looking for something to stick below my name that just felt good. And
do you want to build the wall?
Not that one.
Snowflake. Yeah, you're still a snowflake. You got it. It's all yours.
Not even metal slats you can cut through with a hacksaw.
No.
Yeah, not going to work. So Lockwood doesn't know how we end the show.
I do not.
He does not. I told you to pay attention, Elizabeth, when we finished up this program last time you were on. Do you remember what it was?
I know he said something.
He knows he said something. Yes. All right. I'm gonna give you one more tutorial, okay. and Daniel's gonna gonna learn how this works, and I expect you to pay attention, and be able to follow along next time we do this. So this has been episode 45, January 12th, 2019, the Berning, BERNING question. That is it for this episode of the Triangle Talk Show. I got to get myself hovered over the YouTube to make it go away without staring away from the camera. And this is it. This is the 3-word phrase that ends the show. Over and out.